Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Inking Out Loud podcast. I am your host, as usual, Rob Santos. I'm joined once again by my co-host, Mr. Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And returning special guest, once again, Mr. Jarrod Livingston.
Hey, guys.
So, for episode 22, we're going to be discussing Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. It's the first novel in his young adult trilogy, The Reckoners. And I, in particular, really excited to talk about this one because I've been waiting years to discuss this one in detail. I read it in 2013 when it first came out. I fell in love with it immediately. I was waiting for the releases, like counting the days for those final weeks, like literally counting the days. So yeah, I want to get your guys' impression. Like, how do you feel that Steelheart, or at least the Reckoners trilogy in general, kind of stacks up against the rest of Brandon Sanderson's writing?
So Steelheart, I mean, it's an enjoyable book. It's definitely, a fun read.
Open my drink here. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. I do think I like the second book in the Reckoners a little more.
Oh yeah.
And I may even like Calamity, the third book, more than Steelheart.
Really?
But we'll get to that when we, a couple weeks down the road here. Because that's a more involved conversation. But, I mean, Steelheart's still a good book.
It's nice to read a YA that I don't despise.
Yeah, but then again, a lot of those I assume are coming directly out of Brandon Sanderson, eh?
Most of them, yeah.
Because I mean, that's
there
just
are a few that...
most of the YAs that I enjoy are his. Like I'm not a huge YA person in general. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe it's been the subpar, I don't know, publishing industry lately in that area. But I mean, I guess I really can't say lately too. I mean, like when I was in high school, I should say. I was getting into fantasy at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. YA was a little immature to me at that point.
Yeah, there was definitely a YA boom with like a certain type of dystopian YA that after the Hunger Games that we had so many. The Maze Runner and Divergent and like all these things that were essentially Hunger Games clones, and there was that wave of kind of mediocre or worse YA trying to ride the coattails of something super popular.
And there are cliche YA things in this book, but I think Brandon does it well for the most part.
Yeah, I agree with that. In general, I think it's a well done book. I mean, I like it. I gave this like 3.5 stars, maybe 4 stars. Like, it's a solid book. It's just not my favorite by Brandon.
Really? See, that's interesting to me because as a diehard Brandon Sanderson fan, I will say this: Steelheart is in my top tier of Sanderson. Like legit. Like I fucking love this book. I'll come straight out and say it. Like it kept me entertained so long through the entire thing. I mean, the book itself is, of course, as compared to Sanderson's usual body of work, it's still rather short. It's a YA book. Mm-hmm. But the amount of stuff, the amount of action he has packed into it, the amount of jokes that didn't fall flat for me, there was so much. Oh, hold on, we'll get there. There are some that do. Trust me. I am well aware of the fact that I'm very biased going into this. Like I said, like Steelheart is in my top tier of Sanderson. So I'm going to have to try very, very hard not to be glowing too much about it. I'm going to have to try very hard to find some things to complain about. Cody's on that list. Don't worry. We'll get there.
For sure.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I loved this book. I loved it. Sorry, Jerry, go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I'm with Drew. I like the series as a whole very much, but Firefight and Calamity I probably like better. But that's not saying this one's bad.
Yeah, like
it's quite enjoyable.
It doesn't have the scale, the spectacle that Stormlight has, but at the same time, I just think it's just because it's done so well for what it is. I mean, there's so many things about this book that I think Brandon does perfectly. I mean, I don't know what kind of stride he hit when he started to write this one, but I mean, I just want to start talking about like his style. You guys ready to just fucking dive right into the meat and potatoes here? Okay.
Yeah, so, I was gonna ask you straight off. I was like, so you love this book so much, you have it in your top tier.
Oh,
what
it is
do
in
you
my
love about it?
Okay, so let's start with the opening line first off. Okay, now and this might sound a little outlandish or dramatic, whatever you want to call it, but I consider like this opening line to be one of the greatest opening lines I have ever read. ever, like across any medium, period. I've seen Steelheart bleed. Now, let's unpack that fucking statement, okay? Because we have 4 words. I have, statement of identity, you know, establishing point of view, yada yada. I've seen Steelheart bleed. With 4 words, Sanderson immediately made me ask 4 questions. I was asking, who are you? Who is Steelheart? Why was he bleeding? And why was it a big deal that he, in particular, was bleeding in the first place? Like, 4 questions with 4 fucking words. I mean, does a hook really get any more efficient than that?
Yeah, I will agree with you there. The opening line of Steelheart is masterful. The prologue in general is very effective, but that opening line especially is a stroke of genius on Brandon's part.
Yeah, for sure.
It definitely hooks you, and I think the scene as a whole really grabs you for sure.
Yeah, like the way he establishes that scene in the bank, you know, we get descriptions of the cubicle as this imitation of a comfortable home, just as the mortgage man wore an imitation of a smile, and he's surrounded by stock photos of smiling ethnic children, you know. It kind of instills this feeling of like sterility, this coldness. It makes me uncomfortable because it feels like stale and manufactured. But then we see the immediate reason for this. You know, as the epic enters the bank, that epic being Death Point, of course, we see a complete reversal. We see raw humanity in action. The juxtaposition, I think, is what makes that scene stand out so well. And of course, you have the line that ends it. You know, the 2 phrases that play off one another, like bookends on this prologue. I've seen Steelheart bleed, and I will see him bleed again. It was perfect. It was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't find a flaw anywhere in that prologue. It was great.
Sure, yeah.
So... Oh, I do want to say I like how he clearly right away establishes the kind of rules of this magic system, if that's what you want to call it, even though it's, you know, sci-fi. But it's so like classic Sanderson. It's balance, it's strengths, but limitations that define that strength. It's a puzzle to figure out. Bravo. It was simple. He explained it really quickly. It was not a difficult concept to grasp, and then he took it and ran with it. So I think it was awesome.
Yeah, the whole premise of the Reckoner's trilogy is super cool. I mean,
yeah.
It's one of those situations where you go back to Sanderson's laws of magic and the zeroth law, where he just says err on the side of awesome, and you can tell he invoked the zeroth law a lot writing these books.
Oh, he definitely did.
He took what is inherently an awesome idea, that being superheroes, and in his typical Sanderson fashion, put a really fun, clever twist on it, and used, you know, this concept of superheroes and then turned evil to create like a really neat like plot points and, you know, setups, but B, do what you need to do with superheroes, and that is have these big bombastic epic scenes, because that's what superheroes are. They're larger than life.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back.
Yeah, and so when you have supervillains, you know, then you got to get creative in how you make it cool, but also, like, you know, you got to have your good guys, you know, not be totally overpowered, right? You know, you have to find some way to balance it out, and having like Prof and his technology, you know, there was a really neat way to balance it.
I mean, granted, the Reckoners group has 2 epics in their midst, so...
Yeah. Yeah, no, like, the premise is so simple and so elegant at the same time that I'll say, like, when someone, you know, asks what I'm reading, they see me reading a book or an e-reader somewhere, or if I'm just having a discussion with somebody with whom I have a lot in common, and I want to recommend to them a Sanderson book, I will usually recommend that they start with Steelheart, or, like, you know, one of his YA books, but usually Steelheart is at the top of my list because it's the elevator pitch for that works so perfectly. You could get that premise across in 30 seconds. You have this main character who basically, for all intents and purposes, joins a supervillain hit squad, right? I mean, it's such a simple, like I said, yet elegant premise that it hooks people right away, and it's definitely the one that I go to when I recommend if I want to get somebody into Sanderson. I'll usually get them to test their foot, you know, dip their toe in the proverbial water with Steelheart, because it hooks you so fast, it brings you in so well, and
it's funny because I would recommend Mistborn to somebody first,
Really?
But these both follow the style of this kind of Ocean's 11 crew running a job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, I have the unique perspective, I guess, of somebody having actually gotten into Sanderson with Mistborn. That was my first Sanderson ever. When I heard that he was finishing the Wheel of Time, it was Mistborn that I read first, and it was hard for me to grasp at first. Like the 8 different metals that we knew at the time, or you know what? I'm not going to get into spoilers for that. I just realized I might have just strolled right through that one. No, I'm not going to get into the magic system so much, but I will say the magic system was difficult for me to grasp at first. Mistborn started off a little slow for me. And he almost lost me until like the halfway point, and started to pick up. And then once I saw how he, pulled it off, I mean, I was just off to the races at that point. I was just consuming everything Sanderson at that point. But no, I started with Mistborn, and I actually almost didn't get into it at first, at least.
That's really interesting.
It's definitely a good one. I can understand people starting with it, but I just wouldn't call it like quintessential Sanderson.
For me, it's really a matter of are we talking Cosmere or are we talking just you want to read
his
the Brandon
style?
Sanderson?
You want them to get into his kind of his tongue-in-cheek humor, his self-aware. He's got his very distinct style that I think he employs with.
And it's like if I'm recommending Brandon Sanderson to a friend, it really does come down to it's like, do I think this person is the kind of person who's gonna want to read 35, 40 books over the next 30 years, like, and if that's the case, if I know this is the kind of person who wants to get immersed in something huge and grand and complex, that's when I'm going to say start with Mistborn. But if it's somebody who just wants a fun read and they're like, oh, I've heard Brandon Sanderson's good, but I don't really have the time to read like a big old series, I'll be like, hey, check out Steelheart.
Yeah. You're right. There is a lot to be said about knowing the person with whom you're going to be recommending books to. If they're the kind of person who's into epic fantasy already, yeah, definitely I'd be going for Mistborn or even Stormlight if they're really into the big ones. But actually, then again, I would never recommend you start with Stormlight. Never mind. No, I take that back. No. But if it's somebody who's just a casual reader, I will definitely tell them to jump right into to Steelheart. I mean, it's an easy Audible purchase. Awesome, get it out of the way, especially if you have a credit. I mean, McLeod Andrews, he's not as epic as some other audiobook narrators' voices are, but he's entertaining all the way through. His accents are spot on. I love his Abraham, by the way. We'll get into that later, that French-Canadian guy. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna ask you about him, like what your thoughts are as a Canadian.
Yeah. As a Canadian who grew up, kind of immersed in a lot of the French language and culture, it was kind of funny to hear somebody swearing essentially in French. At one point, Abraham says "Calice," and I was like, "Ooh." I wasn't expecting that.
Which is kind of risque for a Brandon Sanderson.
A little bit, especially for a YA of all things.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I got some positive points about Abraham to discuss later. But hey, we want to start talking about our characters?
Yeah, sure.
Let's talk about, obviously, our main character, David. What do you guys think of David?
Overall, he's a likable character. I enjoy his dedication and his earnestness. Mm-hmm. He's a refreshing character in that it's easy to root for him. But I cannot stand the metaphors.
What?
I hate it so much.
What? You guys are... You have to be fucking kidding me. Okay, hold...
It does not land.
Fuck up, hold on.
It does not land.
You mean to tell me that you liked Cobb? You liked Cobb, but you didn't like David's metaphors. Okay, all right, we're ending the podcast. Right. Yes. I don't know what else to say. I mean, shit.
That's a wrap, folks.
I mean, I guess that goes to show, everybody has their own distinct taste. I just got a
I don't know. Some of it is like
wow.
Like there are a couple of metaphors like here and there that
Cobb, of course, being from Sanderson's Skyward. Sorry, we probably should have said something there. Go ahead. Sorry,
but there are a couple metaphors, similes here and there that land for me, but most of all, I roll my eyes. I mean, it.
See, that's my reaction to Cody for the most
like
part.
Cody's even worse. I mean, do not get me wrong on that. And this is we're talking about personal taste here and senses of humor and we've talked in previous episodes covering Sanderson about how a lot of the time he's like he forces the humor a little too much. He tries too hard, and I feel like David's metaphors are a prime example of trying too hard.
Well, it's funny once or twice, but then it's like the 10th time you're just.
Well, see, and that's what I have written down here about that specific point. Okay, so I'll discuss David real quick. My general impressions of David and why I liked him so much. See, I consider him like such a winner of a main character. He's so inexplicably fun to read for some reason. His personality traits are, for the most part, all the things I normally hate in a character, or at least what make me hate being inside of a character's head. You know, yes, he's naive, he's immature, he's got a very distinct and static sense of humor. But for some reason, I loved every fucking minute of it. And it wasn't actually until this read-through that I realized why it doesn't bother me. Because I've read this shit at this book. I've probably read it 12 times, 15 times. Could be upwards of 20 if you count, like, portions on audiobook. I do a lot of welding, dude. I got lots of time to listen. But the reason it doesn't bother me, I think it's just subtlety. I mean, it occurred to me in chapter 8 on this reread when we get David's simile about, and they're not, I didn't notice until afterwards. I didn't realize this. Yeah, they're not actually metaphors. They're similes.
Well, so
some of them approach the territory,
so technically similes are a subclass of metaphors.
Okay.
But yet, more accurately, they're similes.
Yeah.
Than, like, the fact that he calls them metaphors instead of similes does bug me as well.
Part of the joke. I think it just highlights more of his arrogance. But anyway, in chapter 8, we get David's simile about Megan's eyes being frigid enough to liquid cool a high fire rate stationary gun barrel. And it occurred to me at that point that this was only the second one that we had gotten so far across 8 chapters. And now call me crazy, but I get the impression that if Brandon wrote David like he wrote Lift, for example, or Wayne, we wouldn't be able to go 3 paragraphs in between. I mean, some chapters we wouldn't be able to go 3 sentences in between, you know? We would have had about 30 at that point, with like 95 to 150 more to come. So I think, for me, it was subtlety. Of course, I did notice it started, not that I was paying attention to that, it did kind of increase in frequency as Brandon got more comfortable, I guess, with his metaphors. But I do want to say, there's something about those metaphors that almost work that I find endlessly hilarious. Because it's very easy to just come up with a completely nonsensical metaphor, but he has this knack for finding this one that almost makes sense, or just has that one unnecessary detail. I don't know. It struck for me. I loved it every time. Not every time, but most of the time.
It was funny you brought up that particular one, because that's one of the few that I actually enjoyed, because it serves as more than just being, you know, nominally funny. It's that it actually helps build, you know, character in it.
Yeah,
it's pulling double duty, and I mean, that's my favorite thing about these books is David's relationship with Megan. I think it's one of
you've actually
Sanderson's
previously,
absolute best relationships. Like just from the very beginning, and how their like professional relationship develops as part of the team, and then David's increasing attraction and how they like navigate mutual dislike but admiration, and the way that
it's very realistic
and progresses, and it's very easy for a lot of like YA books to have cliche relationships between the lead characters, and it's very easy for those to feel fake. It
manufactured.
But it was like David and Megan in this book remind me very much of like I could have seen a relationship like this, obviously not with the like contextual circumstances of like, you know, a dystopian hellscape ruled by supervillains, but I could see a relationship like this progressing with like people I knew in high school. You know, it felt real, it felt valid and earned, and like they didn't just fall in love because it's a YA and you need somebody to fall in love. It's like, no, they, you know, so that's my favorite part of David's character, is the way he interacts with Megan specifically, but to a wider extent, the way he interacts with the other people in the Reckoners. Prof also stands out on that one, by the way.
Like with the way David interacts with Prof, or Prof interacts with others.
The way David interacts with Prof.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think David's highly relatable, especially for the target audience of this book.
Yep, absolutely.
I think sometimes, like, he's 18, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes he acts younger than 18.
Sorry,
I don't know
did you
how
say
much
younger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that was on purpose by
But
Brandon.
sometimes I mean, I'm 27, and sometimes I act younger than 18 still, you know?
Also true.
That's why it resonates perhaps so much with me.
Yeah, he's relatable. He has faults.
Yeah. He's got, you know, I still love his sense, like his humor so much. It's not just with, you know, the similes. He's not just a one-trick pony. He just has this kind of young, but like fresh, exciting, and still naive outlook on life. Like, for example, when he sees the motorcycles in Diamond's shop, that may have been some of the hardest I've ever laughed reading a Sanderson book. When he goes into the description of these motorcycles and he describes them, they look like alligators, really fast alligators wearing black, ninja alligators. And then I'm probably not going to use that one on Megan. I was fucking cracking up at that point. And then we get the situational humor as well. We get Megan walking by, and David just even points to it, and she's immediately like, no. He's like, but they're awesome. And she's, no. And then Abraham, all he has to do and again, in that moment, all he has to do is look at David when he walks by, and then he looks at the bike, and he immediately realizes what David wants. He just smiles and says, no.
Yeah.
Well, David definitely has funny moments.
Yeah.
That I really enjoy. It's just the metaphors didn't land for me at all.
Oh, okay. So, I can
I'm not
see
saying
that.
like I didn't enjoy the humor at all in this book, because there were bits and pieces that, you know, amused me. But the two major sources of comic relief, that being Cody and the metaphors, mostly didn't land for me.
Cody, oh my god. You know, I can kind of see it, like for example, going to Skyward again. No spoilers, no worries. But like her verbatim, her like war cries. You know, I wasn't a big fan of those, but I can see how a lot of people would be a big fan of those. I suppose I couldn't apply that to this. I loved it so much, but I can see how some people would get sick of it. Sure. But I loved them so much that I was actually considering asking you, Drew. I was like, you think we should have, like, instead of like a 3 favorite scenes or 3 favorite lines, maybe we just have like a 3 favorite metaphors? Because I loved them so much. So it really surprises me to hear that you guys are exasperated by them in some cases. Obviously, you said you liked a few of them.
Yeah.
But since you mentioned the C word, you want to talk about Cody?
Yeah.
Get out of the way.
I guess so.
You sound so excited to dive into that one. I hated it.
I don't know if there's really much to say on this besides I really didn't like him.
I mean,
he's maybe my least favorite Sanderson character ever.
Really? Like, in the presence of such spectacular examples like Lift?
I will say I like Lift a little more than I like Cody.
Oh, okay. No, I like Cody a little more than Lift.
Like, Lift at least has like a few redeeming qualities.
Dude, we were never stuck inside Cody's head though, especially not for a whole fucking novella.
But that's like, it's because
could you imagine having to read this book from Cody's point of view? I would have fucking burned it by now.
I wouldn't have finished the book. But that very perspective of getting inside Lift's head is probably why I like her a little more, because I feel like there's a little more understanding than you get with Cody, where he's just Cody's just there, and he's there so blatantly for one reason, and that reason annoys the hell out of me. And so
he's kind of just the creepy adult who's trying to be friends with the younger teen, and it doesn't.
I have to acknowledge that it seems like Brandon tried to give him a kind of, you know, relatable side. I mean, we got his whole backstory about being a cop and what it meant to him, and how he never stopped being a cop, and he still carries the badge. It's just, it was okay. I mean, it was a decent backstory, I thought, but it didn't justify all those cringy.
To me, I mean, Abraham's a much more enjoyable side character than Cody.
Sorry, say again.
To me, Abraham's a much more.
I loved Abraham. And I want to definitely get on to Abraham next if we can. But I just want to quickly bring up my best and least favorite Cody moment. Best and least favorite? Hold on. Well, that you know what I'm trying to say.
And least favorite?
Yes. So, because I realized some people probably do like Cody, right? A lot of people probably do like Cody.
Probably.
So I'm going to extend the proverbial olive branch. I'll tell you one thing that I do like about him after this. But first I'm going to have my biggest complaint. Chapter 12.
You're a bigger man than I am.
Chapter 12. He literally asks Abraham to set him up for a joke. He says, Abraham, ask me why it's so tragic that young David's worked so hard and yada yada yada. Of course, Abraham just goes right into it. Why is it so hard? It's so tragic that it's like, why would you just why encourage it, right? And I don't know. This is the point I was already starting to get sick of Cody's humor. But okay, now for the proverbial olive branch, I will say my favorite Cody quote. It was when they were discussing the number of problems with assassinating Steelheart. He goes on, he's like, he flies, he's got impenetrable skin, he's immune to radiation, explosions, like fire, he's immune to everything. He goes on to everything. He's like, a couple things? Come on, that's like 3 things, even though he just listed like 40 of them. And then he holds up 4 fingers. I kind of enjoyed that one. That was okay. You know, he lists all this shit, and then he says, that's like 3 things, and puts the wrong number of fingers up. I had like, it wasn't like a laugh, it wasn't even a chuckle. It was like a forceful exhalation through the nostril, you know?
Yeah.
Like, all right.
The opposite of a nine-nave sniff.
Yeah, a sniff. It wasn't a snort. It wasn't like a, you know, but it was a, yeah.
Yeah. But no, I want to hear your thoughts on Abraham.
That's what nine-nave sniff is. Is that what nine-nave sniff is? Because I figured it would have like an inhale. Is it just like a exhalation,
I always thought it was like kind of a huff, like a.
Like, it's hard for me to tell if you're inhaling or exhaling. I always sniff. I always like inhale. Like what is she trying to smell? So, anyway, sorry, I'm just going off on a tangent there. Sorry, you just said you wanted to bring something up, and it got me really excited subconsciously, and I forgot what it is.
I want to hear you talk about Abraham. I want to get the Canadian perspective on the Canadian character.
Man, McLeod Andrews, especially listening to the audiobook, he puts that, he's got this excellent French Canadian accent that he puts on Abraham. Like, one of the first things we hear Abraham say, like, he's immediately nice to David, right? Mm-hmm. And he sticks up for David right away. He's like, I don't know, I like him. He's got a certain something. You know, un homme téméraire. He's got a bunch of French phrases that he just, you know, employs in his vernacular, and especially the way he gets offended at the way, I think it was Ricochet was the epic, and he's like, oh God, it's so sacrilegious taking this beautiful French word, turning it into something that Cody would say, Colis. And I was like, strikes home. I love it. I expected that, like, every single scene that McLeod Andrews was presenting Abraham, I felt like he had a poutine in his hand and a cigarette in his mouth. It was great.
So he rang as authentically Canadian.
He did rang, like, Sanderson must know an authentic French Canadian, because I work with like 13 of those dudes that are like straight up French Canadian. They sound exactly like that.
See, it's funny. Like, I want to kind of make a comparison. There's another book that Jarrod and I read as part of our book group a few years back called Last Call at the Nightshade Lounge.
Oh yeah?
And there's like a Canadian character in that book, and he felt like so not Canadian. Like, it was, it well, really felt like the author of that book was like trying to hit his like diversity checklist, and
really?
Was just like
Canadians
throwing.
Diverse?
Well, but like, so this particular character was like LGBT.
Oh, okay. So maybe Canadian was part of the equation.
Yeah, and so, but like, it
Gotcha.
felt like each one of these side characters in that book, he was like reaching into a hat and grabbing like 2 or 3 labels, and he's like, all right, this is this character, and then reaches in and grabs 2 or 3 more, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna make that character, and like, you know, and it didn't feel like that with Abraham in this. It just felt like he wrote a Canadian character.
I'm not
you know?
French.
Like,
I'm Canadian, you sluts. Yeah, he definitely rang as authentic. Yeah. I mean,
and I love his personality, how it jives with being kind of the weapons guy of the group.
Yeah,
too.
he's tall, he's jacked, he's soft spoken. He's just like, do I have a man crush on Abraham? I might actually have a man crush on Abraham. I don't know, but no, he was Abraham was infinitely more enjoyable than Cody was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So.
Abraham's either Abraham or Prof is my favorite of like the kind of secondary characters.
I kind of wasn't a big fan of Prof either, and it's nothing in particular that he does. Well,
really?
Maybe it's just how much of a fucking asshole he is. Well,
That's why
really
I like him.
Cursing up a storm in this episode.
Granted, there's a really good reason for that, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I suppose there is.
Yeah,
but Cobb also had a good reason for that. He never cursed.
True.
Well,
I don't know. But then again, that would imply they have to be the same character. But
and I will say, like, when I say Abraham and Prof are probably my 2 favorites of the secondary characters, I count Megan as a primary character in this book.
I think I would be. Oh, in this book too, eh?
Yeah, like in the whole series, but in this book, I mean, like she's
Obviously not to get
she's
into
a
spoilers for the
key-
next two,
key
don't worry.
figure. You know, like she plays a bigger role than any of the other side characters do, as far as David, our point of view character, is concerned. And I love Megan. She is, without a doubt, like one of probably my 3 favorite Brandon Sanderson characters. She's up there with like Chris and Wraithen. Like I
Certainly
love
female
Megan.
characters.
I love Megan.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't dislike her. I do like Megan as well.
Like,
I just your favorite,
I
really.
absolutely have a crush on Megan.
I mean, she sounds hot. Sounds hot. But, I mean, like, I don't know. She felt kind of one-dimensional to me. I mean...
Oh, really?
I mean, to begin with, coming out of the gate, I should say she does definitely get a very much more in-depth exploration of her character in
Not at the
books
end.
2 and 3. Don't worry. But, I don't know.
Well, even this one.
Interesting. I'm loving how many differing opinions we have on Sanderson characters, despite the fact that we love the books so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that Megan, Prof, or David are one-dimensional. Some of like side characters kind of are, but that's to be expected with
Yeah, like
with the
Abraham's pretty
crew.
one-dimensional, but he's
Yeah.
awesome. So
Yeah, well, he doesn't.
okay.
Yeah, he doesn't have enough screen time to really justify anything deep. I mean, we do get some more information about him in the future, about his past, but you know, he never really takes up the center spotlight. He doesn't need to. I think these books have just enough Abraham in them. It's like a seasoning. No, actually, I want more Abraham. Actually, I would love to see like a novella with his backstory. It'd be awesome.
of course you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. This is you know, this is why we do these podcasts. You know, we can talk about characters and talk about these things that, despite the fact that we have such similar tastes in the broad scale, you know, when you bring it down to like individual character level and stuff like that, it's great having like, you know, different opinions and different perspectives on things and seeing how and why we think that way.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like, I mean, it's kind of how like Drew and I, you and I, like we became friends in the first place. We discovered we both liked the Wheel of Time, and then we discovered that we both loved heavy metal, and from there we both loved Halo, and then it just kind of ran away.
Yep.
But it's also great finding people that like the same thing you like, and also but for different reasons. You know? Like I like Steelheart, you like Steelheart, but it sounds like we're getting vastly different enjoyment out of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you just mentioned, part of the reason we became friends was because we liked a lot of the same music. And for instance, there's a girl, you know, went to college with her, and she's into like all the same bands as I am. You know, every concert I go to here in Colorado, like she's there.
She's single?
But no, she's not. But it's like she loves all the same bands as I do, but like all of her favorite songs are all of my least favorite songs
Oh,
by those
okay.
bands.
So it's kind of like inverse you and I with Sanderson
Yeah,
characters.
like she'll go and like, for instance, you know, we saw Nightwish, you know, a couple of years ago,
Nightwish.
and she
favorite.
left before the encore because she's like, I don't really like Last Ride of the Day or Ghost Love Score.
What?
Whoa!
Yeah,
Oh, whoa! Those
Yeah.
are my two favorites: Ghost
Right?
Love Score and Last Ride of the Day.
Nope, unfriended.
yeah,
Unfriended.
like she loves like Dear God and A Little Piece of Heaven by Avenged Sevenfold, and I'm like, you could
those are
erase
both
those
good,
songs from existence.
Oh, Little Piece of
and-
Heaven was great. Oh, we're getting into
no.
fucking metal talk now.
But this is kind of like the same, you know, kind of track we're on with like Sanderson, you know, and
I'm
how there
sure-
are things like, you know,
I'm sure a lot of people like Cody.
yeah, like
Ah.
I enjoyed Spence's, you know, War Cries, and you didn't really like those, and then you enjoyed David's Metaphors, and I don't like them, like, you know.
True, but I will say this, like for example, about Cody or about like Stick or Lift. If you
yeah.
like those things, I don't like you. No, I can't say that. I can't say that. But
I mean,
there's
I
a
roll
good
my
chance
eyes a
I
little bit
probably
when I see
don't like
somebody
you.
like, yeah.
Here come the angry Facebook
I'm
comments.
gonna get myself into so much trouble for this podcast. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we said it in the very first episode where we were like, do we want to talk about our least favorite Brandon Sanderson characters? And I said, no, let's not alienate our audience in the first episode.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, we waited 22 episodes to alienate you.
Yeah.
So.
So buckle up, bitches. I don't know if we'll censor that one. Maybe. Who knows? But before we get too far off of Abraham, I want to give him a really quick shout out. freaking badass that was. The scene where they're taking on the thugs who tried to rob them.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he challenges them to the contest. He's like, I tell you what, you take a shot, I take a shot.
And this is when he got shot.
Just pones the guy, and then he helps him. He's like, apply pressure, please, over here. Do you know who we are? I was like, oh man, this guy is just such a smooth badass.
Yeah.
I think I do have a man crush on Abraham. I think I do.
So what about Prof?
Okay, so Prof. I liked Prof, but notice I used past tense. I liked Prof on my first few read-throughs. I didn't like him so much afterward, and I really can't point to a specific reason why.
Huh.
And this might be the first complaint I have about an audiobook, but I don't like McLeod Andrews' Prof very well. It's too gravelly, it's too but when I don't know. And then everything that comes out of Prof's mouth, of course, matches that. He just never has anything positive to say, this guy.
Yeah, he's abrasive.
He's dark and he's brooding. He's constantly brooding. It's like, lighten the fuck up, man. I mean, I guess you can't really lighten the fuck up in a city that literally lives in night for perpetual forever.
And when you know that if you use your powers, you're gonna join the hellscape.
Oh, Jesus! Sorry, I thought you just spoiled that. I forgot that we found that out at the end of this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a confession to make. I managed to listen to 3/4 of the audiobook, and I didn't have time. I ran out of time to finish the rest. But I mean, like I said, I've read this book over a dozen times. I remember everything. But only the first 3/4 of it is fresh at the moment. I totally forgot that we found that out at the end of this book. Okay, cool.
This is only my 4th time reading this. Yeah,
only your 4th, eh?
Yeah, because I read it when it came out, and then I did the standard reread thing where I reread it before Firefight, and then reread Steelheart and Firefight before Calamity.
I'm just making a joke about how most people don't read the same book 4 times. I mean, we are obviously exceptions, dude. You and I.
Besides Megan's reveal and then Steelheart's weakness reveal, I didn't remember much.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I liked how it had its own, like, Steelheart's weakness played out. I really, really enjoyed how that was that very clear mystery, like, literally from the first scene of the book. And it took so long for it to unfold, and we finally got it. It made sense.
I will say that mystery is one of the best executed, that Brandon has done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because he tends to have these little mysteries, sometimes big mysteries, at the heart of a book,
mm-hmm.
and this is one of them that I thought he pulled off very, very well. Like, I thought it was harder to figure out.
Yeah, it was a little more abstract.
But well enough foreshadowed.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first time I read it, I didn't figure it out until like the page before David figured it out, basically.
Oh, I'll be straight up and say I didn't figure it out until after we had it explained. I was like, oh, that's
when they were at the stadium and like going through all these different, and he's like, what is it? Like, we were so sure it was, and then he has that moment of clarity, but it was it was well executed is the best way I could put it.
Yep.
Like, I compare it to Skyward, for instance, and I think it hit home with a little more oomph than the mystery in Skyward.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was a little like I said already. It was a little more abstract. I was expecting it to be something a little more concrete, like an item that was his weakness, or some. It turned out to be like a state of mind, which was cool. And I think I liked how much foreshadowing we had. Of course, we had the fact that they managed to steal some folders out of the facility that they went on David's first official Reckoner's mission, and it turned out just to be a bunch of propaganda, and actually a lot of it was just made up, and they were just trying to make, for some reason, Steelheart seem worse than he was. These little moments like that they make more sense when you consider them later. But I do want to say I appreciated how Sanderson was directly dismissing a lot of really popular theories right out of the gate with this book.
Yeah.
And not just out of the mysteries that he solved in this book, but some mysteries that we're going to get solved later. For example, David has a conversation with Cody early on where they speculate on the origin of the epics, right?
Yeah.
Cody suggests that they could be, government, superhuman project gone wrong, David considers Calamity itself. He says it might be a comet caught by the Earth's gravity, as he's watching the reinforcement feed, where Steelheart's standing on top of the building and he's looking all epic right before he just kills a bunch of people for no reason. David internally acknowledges that early scholars thought epics were perhaps a new step in human development, like an evolutionary breakthrough. I love how Brandon's taking all of these. He knows what you're thinking already. He's bringing it right up to the front. You're like, oh, see, you see this? You think this, don't you? I loved how he was kind of teasing us a little bit with that.
Yeah, he did that a lot in this book.
For sure.
For the longest time, I definitely thought it was crossfire / a bullet that wasn't intended
Yeah,
to hit him.
I was there with you.
I figured it was
going
gonna
to be non-intentional.
But then I knew once they were going to try it that it wouldn't be the thing.
Yeah.
I was actually going along with Cody. I thought it was going to be like a government superhuman project gone wrong, and Prof was in there somehow. But we're not going to discuss, obviously, true spoilers until Calamity.
Origin of that.
But, yeah.
I would just say, to finish up on Prof, I really liked the concept of him fighting to not be an epic, almost.
I do like that.
To not use his powers.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I really appreciated his dark, brooding moments.
Yeah.
I do, yes. And
we'll talk more about Prof.
I agree.
At the end of Firefight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
more in Firefight, more in
week.
Calamity. Where else is I going?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't have a whole lot more to talk about character-wise. I do want to kind of circle back to Megan briefly.
Sure, yeah.
And specifically the scene like in the elevator shaft, right?
Okay, yeah.
Well, that was like one of my favorite bits of foreshadowing in this book. That was like the most blatant example.
The look in her eyes as she's
like,
reaching for her gun. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no. Like that was the most blatant example that was there for us to figure out that she is an epic and she uses illusions, and but at the same time, because it was such a good character moment between David and Megan, and then when she uses her powers and she turns all like cold and like and that dynamic is one of my favorite things with Megan and David and their relationship. It's her like struggle with herself, like and in that scene that was the first.
Herself?
Well,
philosophy, speculation. Ooh.
For right now, we're saying that it's a struggle with herself, and it really is. It's a struggle with herself.
Ultimately,
but there's more to it than just that. But it was just like a really, really cool moment, and that was the first time I read this book. That was the scene that kind of cemented my enjoyment of her character, where I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm in. Like she's intriguing. She's fun to read because she's not your normal kind of like love interest in a YA book. I don't know, like she was just enjoyable to read.
I think I just found the point where you and I diverged, and I guess that implies that I don't like Megan. No, I still do like Megan, but for me, that was the moment where I went, okay, so, wow, this chick is crazy. Like she's just on and then she's off, then she's on and then she's off. I guess I wasn't really
lost trust of her in that scene.
I wasn't looking too hard at that moment. I wasn't realizing there was a bigger picture happening. I don't know, maybe I wasn't experienced with Sanderson enough to start looking for the clues. In that moment, I was just in David's head. I was like, oh, what? You were just getting along. What's wrong with you? Why all of a sudden this? I didn't understand it. I mean, going back now, obviously hindsight's always 20/20, but I don't know. Like that's one of the points where that started to make me doubt Megan, I guess. And by the way, speaking of Megan, and oh shit, hold on, before we continue with that, there's one question while we're still on this scene actually that I want to get an answer from you, Drew, and from you, Jarrod. Jarrod, you've read Firefight and Calamity?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're not going to spoil those books, but I just want to know if you think we get an answer for this eventually, because I never saw an answer for this ever, or that I picked up on. What the hell were the guards talking about when they looked down? One was looking down. He's like, I hear something. I thought I heard something. It's still there.
Didn't
and David's got the tensor, the vibrating, right? But then the second guard goes, it's coming from, and the first one goes, oh, right. And they stop and they turn away. What the hell was that guy talking about? It's coming from,
Oh,
what the hell else would be down there making that noise?
I recall what you're talking about, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I
That-
don't,
that
I don't
never
think I have an answer for you.
That never struck you as odd? That's from the first time I was like, clue, and then we never got an answer to that
I just
ever.
assumed like some
and here I
secret
am,
project, but
6 years
yeah.
later, and I still don't understand what the hell that was. We never got an answer for that, did we? Again,
That'd be a good
I want to
Sanderson
make it
question.
clear for anybody who hasn't read
Yeah.
Firefighter Calamity, we're not spoiling anything, don't worry. But I just, what the fuck? Oh god, I gotta stop cursing. Why am I suddenly? I think it's the stout doing it to me, man.
Yeah, you've been.
I've been like cursing
You've
up
been
a storm.
acting like
This is
this
a
is a
YA
Kane
novel.
episode, yeah.
Exactly. God.
I mean, we gotta give Pat something to do, so.
Yeah, we got to pay our sound guy for something.
Yeah, really. But we still wanted to talk about Megan. Okay, I wanted to get your impression on this too. Did you, for even 1 minute, think that Megan was truly dead when she got to the bike accident? You didn't buy it for a second, right?
No,
I mean,
I didn't know that it was going to be the same like reasoning for why, but I was expecting there to be some caveat, some loophole that. Yeah.
I mean, she's getting through that, and of course, David picks her up and starts running with her. She's got a pulse. I'm like, oh, okay, so she's probably going to live, She's got a pulse. They're going to save her. Props there. And, it keeps getting weaker, and I'm just like, she's still got it. And then, of course, David has that moment where he's standing over her body, and he's fighting the enforcement officers, and he's confessing all of these things in such a perfect, sentimental, heartwarming way. And I'm just like, oh, okay. No, she's definitely not going to die. There's no way she can't hear what he's saying right now.
Yeah.
But then again, she is unconscious, so maybe she's going to have to hear a recording of it somehow. Oh, he's still wearing the headset. Tia's probably still listening. She's probably recording everything that's happening. Megan's going to live through this. Tia's going to show her that footage. Boom! David's in. But figuratively, not literally. This is a YA novel.
Yeah,
but and then she dies.
Yep.
They can't save her, and they burn the hideout. And I was like, whoa. I guess maybe Sanderson figured he was getting a little predictable with that, so he killed her. And then, of course, we see I almost said Victory Stadium. Look at me going back into Kane mode. Ever since you mentioned Kane, going into the stadium there, we see Megan. We start to see glimpses of her, and I was like, oh, okay, no, all right, it's going to happen. And then by the time you get to the end, he hears his own voice talking on a radio. He hears the words, and right away you recognize what the words are. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I already know what it is. I don't know. I guess maybe that revelation could have come a little sooner.
I honestly guessed it when they burnt their hideout.
Like I didn't. Yeah. Like no part of me believed for a second that she was actually going to die until she did die.
Clicked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, what's that about firefight? What?
No, I was just saying that I guessed it that she wasn't dead when they burnt their lair.
Yeah.
That she was firefight.
Oh, that's right. We got that in this book too. Oh my god. I keep thinking that these are firefight spoilers you're giving out.
No.
No. Okay. God damn it. Wow, we really gotta go do those book 2 and 3 before I fucking give myself the heart attack.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot more to talk about for this book. I mean, do we want to kind of just get some last thoughts in before we do the final draft?
Yeah, sure. I liked the classification of the epics. I kind of thought that was cool. I mean, I think Brandon risked sounding a little formulaic there, but I still think it worked out just fine, especially considering, David has his own classification, Tia has her own classification. But I like, for example, classifying Fault Line as a tier 1 epic, cool. Well, without immortality benefit, cool. But I loved really how she wasn't truly an earthquake epic. She just had a couple of smaller abilities that combined to make what seemed like a much larger one. I kind of thought that was a really cool thing that I hadn't really considered as a possibility before. And the quote is here: "There were true earthquake-creating epics, but they were ironically less powerful, or at least less powerful. The stronger ones could destroy a city with their powers, but couldn't bury a single building or group of people at will. Plate tectonics just worked on too massive a scale to allow for precision." I just love that a little nugget of world building in there. It was pretty cool. It gave it a lot more texture for me.
Sure. Yeah.
I appreciated the twist with Conflux, how he's so powerful, he's so fragile. He's a nice man, We get our first little ray of hope that maybe not all epics they have to be bad,
Yep.
Wait, so I had a question on that really quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it, dude.
So, does Conflux not get angry when he uses his powers then?
I can answer that, but I think it
that-
might involve spoilers.
Is that
Yeah, I
a
think
later
that
film?
involves some info from later books.
I can't
which I could
remember,
just-
honestly.
Shoot your way after we're done the podcast. Just remember to ask that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
There,
Carry on.
I also want to say this book had, I mean, Sanderson, I think for me, one of his trademark things that he does with his books is he has these, what I call, and again, we're going to censor, these oh shit moments where something happens and you literally just have no other reaction besides, oh shit, right? And in this book, we had a couple of really big ones, but my favorite one, I think, might be my favorite Sanderson oh shit moment of all time. And that was when they're on the highway about to hit Conflux, and David realizes it's a trap. And then suddenly, Nightwielder rising through the roof to glory, his fingers spreading tendrils of night. I was like, oh shit! It was such a cool moment. It was the only other one I could think of would be, or there's two more in Stormlight 2 that I can think of could rival that moment.
Ooh,
one of which has a recording for.
Yeah. I think that video disappeared from YouTube. I went
What?
looking for it the other day.
Oh,
and I
it's
couldn't find
unlisted. I'll be able to give you the link for it. If not, I still have it on my computer. I found it the other
it.
day.
Yeah.
Maybe make that a Patreon exclusive, that one.
Oh, heck yeah. No, we totally should. We totally should. It is...
You get Rob's reaction to a
For
specific scene at the
anybody
end
who's
of...
read Stormlight, it's a particular scene at the very end of Words of Radiance, and I read the book before Rob, and I told him, when you get to a certain point of view in this chapter, you need to turn on your webcam and start recording yourself reading this. And
I did.
And man, was it good. It was so good.
Yeah, I actually, believe it or not, injured myself in that video when I slapped my hands on my head like this. I actually cracked my neck in that moment, and it was sore for like 3 weeks after that. Bit of inside info. But,
But anyway, back to Steelheart. Kind of my last thoughts are that, this is a really fun book. I think this was kind of around the time when Brandon started smoothing out his pacing issues. This was one of the first books that I felt, had a much smoother plot progression. It moved at a steady click, and it still has the typical Sanderson avalanche that you're going to get in the climax, but it didn't plod through the first 40-50% of it the way some of his earlier books did, and it really was this kind of delineation around 2013 with Steelheart and Alloy of Law, where I feel like Brandon started putting the pieces together and working out his pacing issues, and so that's one reason that I do enjoy this book.
Yeah, I have a couple of miscellaneous moments that I want to give shout-outs to that I loved so much. There was one, and this is a simile. I'm going to go back and I want to quote a simile. I just loved it so much because it shows, I think, Brandon's talent with knowing the rules of language and then specifically breaking them in a comedic way. And this one I'm bringing up here was in chapter 13. It's in the first minute of chapter 13, and David says Megan's eyes could have drilled holes through. Well, anything, I guess. I mean, eyes can't normally drill holes through things, so the metaphor works regardless, right? Megan's eyes could have drilled holes through butter. And as soon as he said butter, dude, the first time I read that, I remember where I was laying in bed with my e-reader in front of me. I laughed myself to tears. I was squeaking like a fucking seal and clapping my hands because I was laughing so hard at how I was like, well, it could have, I guess eyes can't drill holes through anything, so you could have said anything. Could have picked diamond, could have pick fucking adamantium. Goes for butter. It's the softest fucking oh man, I don't know. It just, the way he set that up and then completely flipped it on its head. It worked so well for me. I loved it. I loved that one. And there was another moment. This is not a particularly funny moment, but it was, again, I want to draw it back to the scene that we just discussed with Nightwielder. That big oh shit moment. There's something I didn't notice about that scene until this read through, and I want to stop to appreciate the fact that it took me about 15 to 20 reads to actually get there before I realized it. That scene was literally kicked off. There was one thing in particular, one little change, one little moment that kicked off that scene. And it was the light turning green at the intersection. I loved that little bit of just that little bit of flair you added there. And for anybody who, and this is not going to, I guess if you've seen the movie, I'm not going to spoil the movie. There's a moment in Spider-Man Homecoming where something very similar happens with a green light shining on a character's face right when they have a moment of realization. And you don't notice it until you go through and look at it. It's like, you know, it's
like a really nice little touch.
There's a word for it. God damn it! When the environment matches a moment of it doesn't matter. Well, I'll figure it out later. But I really appreciated it.
Okay. Yeah.
And just yeah.
Yeah, I'd say generally I really enjoyed it. Kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, it is a feat to get me to enjoy a YA like I did. So he did a very good job with the genre and his intended audience, I think. As for the writing goes, I really liked his use of setting in the book. I liked the dark Chicago, kind of all covered in metal. A lot of it has the characteristic Brandon, highly visual scenes.
Yeah.
You know, Rob, you mentioned earlier the when Night Wielder rises out of the car. That's one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
And staging the climax in the football stadium.
Yeah, the lights, the lime lights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He does a really good job of making the setting something relatable, like Chicago and Soldier Field, but still giving it a fantastic.
Yeah, although
the usual world building.
I will say I cringed, and I still cringe every time I hear the word New Chicago.
Yeah, I was like, on that one.
That's not. There's so many better names you could have come up with for that one.
I never even thought of that.
I wasn't too jazzed by that one.
Yeah,
but,
I'm with you there, and I will also I'll leave one last thought, and that's like the cursing just doesn't do it for me.
The cursing.
What do you mean?
The in-world slaunts.
Oh, sparks.
Sparks.
I like sparks. I don't really like slaunts too much.
Yeah.
Because it tends to, Sanderson tends to work in curses that still kind of match the setting. In Mistborn. Oh wait, hold on. Is there a cursing in Mistborn?
Rust and ruin.
Rust and ruin. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Shouldn't the cursing in this just be normal?
Yeah.
In Warbreaker, it's colors.
Yeah, and.
I don't know.
And storming, it
storming,
varies from
series
to series and books to book of how effective I find his proprietary cursing, so to speak.
Yeah.
And this is one of them that I think falls on the lower end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
So.
And overall, I'd give it 3 out of 5 stars, and 3 out of 5 is good for me. It's an enjoyable book.
Damn. You see,
yeah.
as somebody who went to school wanting to be a filmmaker someday, I really think of a lot of these books in cinematic ways, and I want to say that Stormlight, Jesus Christ, I can't just get any names right today. Steelheart, I think, would stand the greatest chance at being a justifiable big budget Hollywood action movie. In terms of its pacing, in terms of its length, in terms of the setting, if you could throw a big budget at this kind of thing, I mean, in terms of like I said before, the elevator pitch, you could describe the entire premise of this book in 45 seconds or less and hook somebody with it. Yeah. I honestly think, and there's so many, of course, thinking ahead, I extrapolate from that. There's so many potential moments for awesome. It's just the cinematography, like the slow-mo moments, for example. Night Wielder coming out of the roof, like Jarrod just said, spinning his arms wide into darkness. Awesome. The helicopter crashing on the highway. Yeah. Megan gets right underneath it. It gouges like a little scratch in the roof as they just eke past it. Excellent. David and Megan hanging suspended in midair on the motorcycle as David vaporizes the helicopter with a Gauss cannon. Again, there's so many moments of just awesome in this book, and for a book, I mean, this size, I mean, it's just, there's so much to happen in there that I gotta stop glowing about this book. People are gonna not take my opinion seriously.
I've always thought of it as Heroes, the TV show, actually done well.
Yeah,
I've heard much of the same about that TV show, that it leaves a bit to be desired, but the premise is really cool.
So it's funny you brought up the movie aspect of it, Rob, and how you talked about the pacing and the size of the book, and that ties back to what I was talking about with Alloy of Law and Steelheart coming out, within months of each other. And
Alloy of Law came out in 2011. Steelheart was 2013, dude.
Wasn't Alloy of Law 2013?
No, Alloy of Law was 2011.
Really?
It was the year after Stormlight 1.
Wow, I'm All right, but anyway, like they were like in that same like post Way of Kings, but like pre.
We're coming off of
big
like a
time
Stormlight
Brandon.
high.
Yeah. Like they were in that gap, which is probably why I'm like putting them right next to each other. But anyway, Alloy of Law is like the other book along with Steelheart, because I will agree with you on that. The like movie ability of Steelheart is very, very high, and Alloy of Law is the other one where you can write it off as like a self-contained story. You don't need to make a big movie series out of it. It's short, it's fast, it's got tons of these, again, moments of just awesome that that I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are a few like fight scenes and stuff, and like it could just be really well adapted to the screen.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of funny that they were like, they came out relatively close.
Yeah, they did
to each other, and they both fit that sort of niche among Brandon's larger canon of books. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah. Shall we call that a wrap then and move into the final draft?
Yeah, sure.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'll start us off. I mean, I messaged you guys 20 minutes before the podcast and said, "Oh crap, I forgot to get a beer for the podcast. I'm running to the grocery store." So I was trying to find something thematically appropriate. Really couldn't find anything appropriate. I went for something that just made me giggle when I saw the name. This is from Brook Brewing Company. I believe this is based near Toronto. I just saw the side of the Burlington, Ontario. There we go.
Okay.
This here is a stout called Cheeky Bastard.
Nice.
There, you see a little bit of artwork.
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
What kind of stout?
It's how do I tell?
I mean, does it say like does it qualify?
It's our twist on a traditional British stout.
Oh, okay. All right.
Rich roasted
Nice.
body with a smooth, sweet finish, low in ABV but high in deliciousness. I saw it was low in ABV and I was like, ah. But you can't win with everything. But I mean, I'm not normally a big stout fan. I'll be honest. I actually didn't realize it was a stout until I was at the checkout, and I was like, in my head a little bit. It was not bad. I don't know what it was. There was like a sort of lightness to it that I wasn't expecting. It wasn't as bitter as I was normally prepared for with a stout. But yeah, I would recommend it. I mean, if I'm gonna drink a stout from now on, I'll probably steer for that one. Brook Cheeky Bastard Stout. That's what that one was.
Nice. Jarrod, what do you got today?
Yeah, so mine I picked out thematically based on the brewery rather than the individual beer. This is from Epic Brewing, and it is a Mexican-style lager. Los Locos.
Los Locos. And what's the brewing? Is that the brewing company?
The brewing company is
Epic Brewing.
Oh, it's Epic Brewing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you that one. Yep. That was a good one.
Nice. That was a good choice.
What'd you think of it?
Very tasty.
Yeah?
It's summery,
Yeah.
Mexican lager, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, think of like Pacifico or Corona, like that kind of a style.
Oh, what's the other one? So the red can starts with a T. Tecate.
Oh, yeah, Tecate, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I brought a pale ale from Ursula Brewing Company in Aurora, Colorado, and it is called Via Chicago.
Via Chicago.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's and again, like I'm not usually a huge pale ale fan. Like, I mean, like I can enjoy a pale ale or an IPA every once in a while, but I don't really go out of my way to drink them. But this is actually really good. This is one of my one of the better pale ales that I've had in the last year or so. Yeah, they got 4 kinds of hops in it, so it's pretty bursting with that kind of pininess that you would expect. Little bit of like bright fruity stuff because there are citra hops in it, but but yeah, no, it's pretty tasty. I do not know what the ABV is on this though. I was looking and
You would
it's
think
not
they'd be
listed on the
legally
can.
required to print that somewhere. Oh no, you
Yeah.
just drink a few and then you do some math.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Oh man. No, I mean, it's a tall boy. It's a 16-ounce can. It's not like
Ounces. I forget you
You
guys
know.
measure that stuff in ounces all the time down there. In
I don't
Imperial.
feel a whole lot after drinking this, so it's probably not like a a big robust like 9%.
It's
pale
not.
ale or
It's
something
not like these
that.
previous beers that you've brought on the fucking show where you had to chew the fucking things to get them down.
Wait, so do you measure everything in milliliters?
Milliliters. This can right here is 473 milliliters.
That means nothing to me.
I know that sounds ridiculous to you guys. 473 sounds dumb as hell, doesn't it?
So why not
It's
do
probably
475?
Yeah,
It's probably because it's probably like a 16-ounce can, and
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
to fucking do the quick maths around that shit. That's why. Cheeky
Yeah.
bastards.
Well, yeah, I think that's a wrap for episode 22 of the Inking Out Loud podcast.
22 episodes so far, plus
Yeah,
bonus
so-
content.
Next up, we will be doing Firefight, and
Yeah, boy!
like Steelheart, we'll be doing the whole book for that
One of
episode.
Drew's favorite books by Sanderson.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited for that one.
You know, I'm not a huge Firefight fan. Definitely not as big of a Calamity fan. Firefight's good, definitely good. For me, Steelheart is just you can't beat it. I mean, obviously, there's Words of Radiance, Oathbringer that whoop its ass, but Steelheart for me in this trilogy is hands down the best one.
Well, that should be a pretty good conversation next week then.
Yeah, it will be.
And if you want early access to that conversation, check out our Patreon. We have a couple of pretty fun tiers, and one of them you can get early access to episodes. Another one you can get access to bonus short story episodes, and we will be covering Mitosis, the Reckoner's short story, for one of those in June. So take a look at that, and like we're not doing this because we're trying to make money and replace our day jobs. We just want to be able to pay our sound engineer, pay our artist, and pay for the hosting, so that we can continue reading awesome books, drinking good beers, and hopefully giving you guys a little bit of entertainment. So
Let's pay Pat, let's pay Danny. They do so much for us.
yeah.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Danny.
So, as usual, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey. With me, my co-host, Rob Santos.
Yo.
And our very special guest, Jarrod Livingston. Thanks for coming on, Jarrod.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again, Jared.
We'll catch you next week.
See you next week.
Bye, everyone.